Well, the main message from the envoy of the President of the United States, that support from America will continue, was obviously very timely for us, especially on Monday, when, after threatening promises and a meeting with the NATO Secretary General, the world heard from Trump. Putin has been given another 50 days of impunity. So what is this ultimatum really worth? And what is the essence of the announced aid to Ukraine, which the leaders of European countries themselves heard about for the first time live on air? Our international correspondent Yana Slesarchuk analyzes the situation.
We've gathered all of Putin's recent ultimatums.
In a week. In 2 weeks. In 2 or 3 weeks. In 2 weeks. In about 2 weeks.
And we're figuring out how the latest one is different from the others.
We will impose very strict tariffs if there is no peace agreement in 50 days.
What kind of tariffs are these? I'll explain in a minute. Cautious dissatisfaction with the overly long ultimatum to Putin is spreading across Europe, especially against the backdrop of the EU's own barely agreed 18th package of sanctions against the Kremlin.
I'm convinced that the 50 days announced by Trump are too long. September 2nd is too late.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte tried to interpret Trump's words after a meeting with whom the American president announced the ultimatum.
In 50 days, he will impose secondary sanctions on countries like India, China, and Brazil. So I strongly urge these 3 specific countries, if you are in charge of them, you should pay close attention, because this could hit you very hard. Please, call Putin, tell him to take peace talks seriously, otherwise this will hit you massively.
50 days is almost 2 months. The time frame is unpleasant, but not unacceptable if you don't take into account that this is far from the first deadline Trump has set for Putin this year. So far, Putin has consistently missed them, seeing time and again that there are no consequences. It started on April 24th after a record Russian attack on Kyiv with ballistic missiles and drones. Before that, Trump and Putin had already had several wonderful, as the American president himself put it, phone conversations. The Americans had even more wonderful negotiations with the Russians in Saudi Arabia. It didn't help. And then Trump addresses the Kremlin leader through his social network.
I'm not happy with the Russian strikes on Kyiv. It wasn't necessary and it's very badly timed. Vladimir, stop! 5,000 soldiers are dying every week. Let's make a peace deal.
The press wasn't satisfied with the explanations.
Are you considering additional sanctions against Russia? What will you do if Putin refuses to talk?
I'll answer that question in a week. I want to see if we have a deal. Right now, there's no reason to answer, but I won't be happy. I'll put it this way, something will happen.
Why aren't you putting significantly more pressure on Russia at this very moment?
I'm putting a lot of pressure. You can't even imagine how much pressure I'm putting on Russia.
However, Russia continued to blatantly ignore the push for peace. A few days later, Trump gives Putin another 2 or 3 weeks to think it over.
Do you trust Putin?
I'll tell you in 2 weeks.
Since then, every 2 or 3 weeks, Putin is given another 2 or 3 weeks. This was on May 16th, during a trip to the Emirates.
I'll tell you, the world is already a much safer place now, and I think that in 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be able to make it a much, much safer place.
This is May 19th.
I'd rather tell you in 2 weeks. For now, I can't say yes or no.
This is May 28th.
I can't tell you that, but we'll find out in about 2 weeks. We'll find out very soon. We'll see if he wants to cooperate or not. And if not, we'll have to act differently.
The pause dragged on for a month and a half. During this time, Ukraine got used to the fact that after every conversation between Trump and Putin, another massive shelling with civilian casualties was to be expected. And the destruction of residential buildings. The American president is starting to feel that Putin is literally destroying his tough guy reputation. Even his wife tells him this.
I come home and tell the First Lady, I spoke with Vladimir today, We had a wonderful conversation. And she's like, oh really? Another city just got bombed.
That's why Trump's rhetoric changes, but not his actions, because the Senate suddenly shelves the nearly finished bill by Republican hawk Lindsey Graham, which the Republicans had been so proud of.
It's important to change the rules of the game with Putin. He doesn't respond positively. The country wants to stop the war, but Putin doesn't. Yesterday, it was clear that the president wants to change the situation. This law will give him a significant lever of influence over China and India, who are helping Putin's war machine.
The bill, supported by 85 senators from both parties, provided for 500% secondary tariffs on goods from countries that still buy energy resources from Russia, such as China, India, or Brazil. But on Monday, during a meeting with Ruda, Trump mentioned a figure 5 times lower.
500% tariffs. Well, you know, that's pretty meaningless, in my opinion, because at a certain point it just doesn't matter anymore. 100% will work just the same. But yeah, I want to make it 100%. And where they'll end up, I don't know. Maybe they'll also go with 100, or maybe they'll go with 500.
The Senate got the hint and stepped aside the very next day. The leader of the Republican majority in the Senate, Jeffrey Thune, says, since Trump has his own plans, the law isn't needed for now. Against the backdrop of the flattering Mark Ruda, who, in the Oval Office, enthusiastically talked about what a talented negotiator the American president is and how Putin should now be afraid of him, the reaction of the EU's chief diplomat is rather cool.
On the one hand, it's very good that Donald Trump wants to put more pressure on Russia. On the other hand, 50 days is a very long time, because we see that Russia is killing innocent people.
Trump himself, of course, doesn't see it that way.
Why are you giving Putin an extra 50 days to wage war in Ukraine?
I don't think 50 days is very long, and it could even be faster. I don't think 50 days is very long. They should be asking Biden these kinds of questions.
However, to the usual accusations against the much-hated Biden, a new emotion has been added, a sense of resentment toward Putin. This is how strategic ambiguity works in the hands of the most unpredictable president of modern times. Just a few hours after these words, several newspapers, starting with the Financial Times, reported that in a conversation with Zelensky, Trump directly asked whether he could strike Moscow and St. Petersburg. And Zelensky supposedly replied, "Give us the weapons, and we'll hit them." Trump had to provide clarification.
Should Zelensky focus more on targeting Moscow or go deeper into Russia?
No, he shouldn't target Moscow.
But signals like these are interpreted in the Kremlin completely differently than how they sound in public. Because, firstly, the occupant of the White House doesn't say anything about strikes deep inside Russia. Secondly, he denies that such discussions could have taken place. Trump's relationship with Putin has always been on a personal level. He can't afford to outplay himself in public, since he already almost sees himself holding the Nobel Peace Prize for stopping someone else's war.
He's already managed to fool many: Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden, but not me.
So now, under the new agreement with the United States, Europe will be buying weapons for Ukraine. This is supposed to strengthen Putin's motivation to think about peace. It's both aid to Kyiv and a benefit. This is how Trump explains to his voters why weapons for Ukraine are no longer the wastefulness he used to talk about for so long. On the old continent, they see it differently.
If we're paying for these weapons, then it's our support. If you promise to give weapons, but say that someone else will pay for them, then you're not really giving the weapons, are you?
A number of countries are responding to the proposal to buy Patriots for Ukraine. They're considering different formats. Next week, they're planning to meet to discuss further actions under NATO's leadership.
We don't have our own Patriots. We need to talk about the details. Either Ukrainians will buy them themselves and will support Ukraine by all means, or will directly give money to the United States. The main thing is that America is ready to supply this desperately needed weapon.
For obvious reasons, Ukrainian military officials do not comment on the quantity, variety, or speed of deliveries. Former ambassador to Kyiv and now Atlantic Council analyst William Taylor offers his own version of why the new Patriots could arrive in Ukraine fairly quickly.
It seems that what President Trump and the NATO Secretary General were talking about is that European countries have their own Patriots. And these Patriots can be transferred to Ukraine fairly quickly. After that, Europeans will buy replacements from American manufacturers. This will help deliver the systems to Ukraine quite quickly.
The recent news that the United States postponed Switzerland's turn for Patriots in favor of Ukraine's urgent need gives hope that something is indeed changing.
Because speed is the most important thing here.
Yana Slicearchuk, Kennedy Shula, Victoria Tismana. TSN Week, 1+1. United News Marathon.
Yes, speed is crucial here, and the details of this new motivation are revealed by the Wall Street Journal. The states are reallocating the supply of American weapons to free up more Patriots for Ukraine. Priority will be given to those allies who are ready to hand over weapons from their own stockpiles to us. For example, Germany has already been moved to the top of the queue to receive the Patriot system, which will allow them to give Ukraine the two systems they currently have. According to the magazine, more agreements between the U.S. and its allies to provide additional weapons may be signed next week. It is already known that on Monday, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth will hold a virtual meeting with other NATO defense ministers to discuss aid to Kyiv. And on Wednesday, a separate meeting of countries that possess Patriot systems will be held under the leadership of NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Europe, Alexis Grinkwich. And there's one more important point for us from this publication. These individual agreements with NATO members may include not only defensive, but also offensive weapons, which the alliance countries will provide to Ukraine and then purchase from the United States. Stay with us, Kellogg. You'll be our air defense. The 3-day visit to Kyiv by the special representative of the U.S. president sparked a bunch of memes among Ukrainians. Even President Zelensky told an American publication that Putin is clearly afraid of America because for 2 nights after General Kellogg arrived, the Russians barely shelled Kyiv, although they did strike other Ukrainian cities. So our jokes are actually quite sad. And what about Kellogg himself? What did he manage to do in 3 days of his visit, besides taking part in the celebrations for Ukraine's statehood day? And why did he spend only 3 days here, when his visit was announced to last a whole week? There are currently no answers to this or the last question. But there is a comment from the general about Ukrainian drones. He was shown about 30 different types. Kellogg said he was impressed by the speed of innovation, and now the U.S. must adopt. His impression may help facilitate a major deal between the U.S. and Ukraine on the production and sale of drones, which Presidents Zelensky and Trump have discussed. According to Prime Minister Svyrydenko, it is already being prepared for signing. Well, General Kellogg was also shown how many American chips we find in drones from Russia and Iran. He took photos of all of them. What will come of it? We'll see. But Kellogg's main task, it seems, is to be the eyes and ears of Donald Trump in Ukraine and to gather up-to-date information to update his own plan for ending the Russia-Ukraine war. These sticks and carrots for both sides, which he wrote about back in April 24, aren't really working so far. Putin systematically deceives Trump. And during this visit, Kellogg met not only with President Zelensky, but also with the country's top military leadership. Our intelligence officers gave Kellogg their data on the Kremlin's plans up to 2036, which indicate that Russia is preparing for a major war not only against Ukraine, but also against NATO countries. I think General Kellogg could have discussed this with the chief of the British General Staff, Tony Radakin, who, coincidentally, also came to Kyiv.